I'm Peter Kruger. I'm a consultant clinical psychologist and a professor of clinical psychology. And I have the privilege of working in a really interesting range of clients. So I do quite a bit of corporate work, and then I spend a lot of my time in the elite sports space. But one of the themes we get asked about very often is when it comes to performance under pressure. So what differentiates average from good to great? And I'm a very firm believer in the fact that it's not accidental. I believe in a principle called success by design. So having an understanding of how some of these factors link together will definitely help us to unpack this topic a bit better and hopefully leave you with a few tangible things you can use yourself as well. So when we think about high performance in whatever environment, whether we talk about sport and business, there's some interesting overlaps, but there are also some significant differences. I always say in an elite sports context, we probably prepare 90% of the time to perform 5% of the time. In business, it's very much the other way around. You have to probably perform 90% of the time, and maybe if you're lucky, you have 10% of the time to get yourself ready and prepared to deal with high performance. But once you understand the broader framework of the principles involved, you can construct and build your own strategy of how to get there. Now, a few things we have to understand about the world in which we operate at the moment is that, in essence, times change significantly in the last 50 or 100 or 200 years. But neurologically, we stayed fairly similar. So the whole idea of performing under pressure, to a large extent, was all based on survival. So our brains, in essence, are wired for survival, which effectively means everything else. So things like performance, well-being, self-actualization, whatever else you might call it, they become secondary. So the brain's primary function above everything else is to get you alive and well in one piece from today to tomorrow. So what is interesting is that what's expected of us in order to stay calm and focused and perform when we get in a high-pressure moment is a very unnatural thing to do. Now, if you look at the world in which we live at the moment, the corporate slang they use for this is they call it a VUCA world, which is the acronym for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Living in a VUCA world, which effectively describes every day we find ourselves in, will have a very interesting impact on how the brain will respond to pressure. Now, when we talk about pressure, not to be confused with stress, pressure and stress are different things, and that's something we'll unpack and discuss in a bit more detail later. But one of the key things that will interfere with our performance is this thing called anxiety, which is a very strong biochemically driven emotion that the body will display at certain times, which will influence things like behavioral execution and judgment and decision making and a whole range of other things that we do. But understanding anxiety becomes quite an important thing because anxiety is effectively the body's smoke alarm. Now, if you imagine for a moment at home, hopefully you have a smoke alarm, but if the alarm goes off, it doesn't mean you're about to die in a blazing inferno. It means something is wrong. So you follow the sound, you walk to where the smoke alarm is, and once you come in there might be multiple reasons why the alarm went off. Could be because there's somebody in the kitchen who tried to make breakfast and they burned the toast. Could be the neighbor that's still embracing the last bit of summer and with the barbecue smoke blew in through the window. Or it could be something a bit more sinister like a kettle plug having a spark in it and some smoke coming out of it. You can turn it off and unplug it. But it doesn't mean you're about to die. So it's important to be able to interpret anxiety in the correct way. It's like a smoke alarm. So when it goes off, like with the smoke alarm, you don't want to dismantle it because you don't like the idea of it. You can't take a cricket bat and smash that thing from the ceiling because there might be, although statistically unlikely, but there might be a time where you would really need that. So it's about reinterpreting where we find ourselves and understanding what anxiety will do and where and how it happens. Now, when it comes to the basic neurology of anxiety, and this will help you to understand why dealing with high pressure is not as simple as it seems. This thinking part of the brain, which is called the prefrontal cortex, it's a very important part in your executive functions, specifically housing your working memory, so that active voice in your head. But it's got a particular part that's at the base of the skull, which is called the orbital frontal cortex. Now, that is a little bit like the brain's radar. It keeps on scanning the environment, building a model of everything going on around you, picking up anything that's VUCA, anything volatile, uncertain, complex, or ambiguous. So if you're in an environment, let's say you're busy giving a speech, stand in front of a group of colleagues, and as you're busy talking, you can see from the corner of your eye somebody rolling their eyes and shaking their head. You don't need a degree in psychology to realize what you've just said annoyed this individual. So you want to continue going on with your speech, but that part of the brain lights up and your brain splits like a core dual processor, effectively. One part trying to stay on track, the other part trying to figure out what just happened here. So when that part lights up, in about 0.2 of a second, it activates another part in the top midbrain, which is called the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, the DAC. Which effectively plays a very important role in pain management, so regulating and managing your physical pain, but also the brain's alarm system. That's why when that part lights up, we get a very uncomfortable feeling, almost that gnawing, itching feeling on the inside where you want to do something about it. That part lights up, it relays all the way around to a part in the midbrain in your limbic system called the amygdala, which plays a very important role in triggering stress, the stress response, release of cortisol, the stress hormone as well, which means your stress levels go up. And once that happens, the brain hates that feeling because we're all about being wired for survival. It wants to get that out of the equation by giving you a sense of certainty back. And in order for that to happen, the brain activates another part, a little bit in the midbrain, but to the outsides, called the insula, which will be responsible for two very important factors. It's a coupler between thinking and emotion. So the brain tries to figure out, why am I feeling this way? But the second thing that it does is it acts as the brain's primary predictor, effectively meaning that it tries to give you a sense of certainty back by predicting what's going to happen next. I think back where we started a few minutes ago, being wired for survival means the brain is not going to predict in the positive. It's not going to tell you how great the situation is going to turn out. It is going to catastrophize. So it goes worst case scenario thinking. The more you go worst case scenario thinking, the more the alarm goes off, the more the stress, the more the prediction. So we get caught up in a biochemical loop of anxiety, which means it changes everything, the way we look at the situation in front of us, because we're not dealing with the facts. We are falling back onto emotion, which also means once that part of the brain lights up, your physical capability for thinking in the prefrontal cortex is situationally disengaged. This is why people do and say silly things when they're under pressure, because the brain gets caught up in this loop. So dealing with pressure, it's quite important to be able to break out of that loop, find ways of grounding yourself in the moment to stay present where you are, to ensure that you can deal with the pressure at hand. So very often the problem with high performance in high pressure environments is not the lack of skill or ability. It's about the application of skill under pressure. So once you have the skill set there, it's can you do the right thing in the right way by not getting distracted, not getting overly emotional in the situation, and focus on what it is you're supposed to do. Now, it's a very difficult thing to do real time because the way the brain is wired means that unless it's a preconditioned response, so unless it's something you've prepared beforehand, you thought about, you have a plan or strategy in place, chances are you will fall back into the old ways of doing things, which is clearly not the best way. So in some of the talks to come, we'll be analyzing, dissecting, and looking at what are these strategies we can do to deal with anxiety better, keep us in the moment better, and allow ourselves to apply our skill sets under pressure. Once you crack that code, it's not a copy and paste job. It doesn't apply to everybody exactly the same way in the same situation, but it gives you a very strong understanding and a good idea of how to put certain strategies and skills in place to deal with it. So do watch this space as we continue with this topic, and we will definitely talk a bit more about how do we get there. But it starts by having a plan and understanding that anxiety is one of the key influences that will have a significant influence on how you actually perform at the end of the day. If you have any comments, please feel free to add it in the comment section. We'll try and answer that as fast as possible. But otherwise, dial in again next time, and we can definitely talk about strategies to deal better with anxiety in high pressure and high performing environments.